A man wakes up from a coma and hears his wife and brother plotting to steal his company from him. He pretends to be asleep and shocks both of them. 6 months. That's how long they said he'd been asleep. 6 months trapped in a silent world, while the world outside moved on without him. But now, his body slowly awakening, Jack felt a prickling awareness that something was amiss. His eyes roamed the room, taking in the medical apparatus and the half-drawn curtains that allowed a sliver of sunlight to pierce the gloom. Movement in the corner of his eye caught his attention, and he turned his head slightly to see them, Emily and Tom, his wife and his brother, huddled together, their voices low and conspiratorial. "It's just a matter of time before we have to make a decision," Emily was saying, her voice a mixture of determination and reluctance. She looked as beautiful as he remembered, with her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders. Yet there was a hardness in her eyes that was new. Tom nodded, his expression serious. "We need to think about Sarah. She deserves a secure future, and we can't wait forever. The court will understand if we—" Jack's heart sank as he listened, the words slicing through the fog of his awakening mind. Inheritance, power of attorney, the sale of his shares in the startup he'd poured his soul into. They were planning a future without him, assuming he would never wake up to reclaim his life. The betrayal was a physical blow, leaving him breathless and aching. He fought the urge to reveal his consciousness, to confront them then and there. But instinct told him to wait, to gather his strength and his wits before making his move. He needed to know more, to understand the depth of their plans and the motivations that drove them to such betrayal. Emily glanced toward his bed, her eyes narrowing as if sensing a change. Jack forced himself to remain still, his eyelids fluttering close, masking the turmoil within. He heard her approach, felt the light touch of her fingers on his hand, a gesture that once held love, but now felt like a charade. "He looks the same," she murmured, a trace of longing in her voice. "Do you think he can hear us?" Tom shrugged. "The doctors say it's unlikely, but we need to be prepared just in case." Their footsteps retreated, leaving Jack alone with the echo of their conversation and the grim reality of his situation. He lay there, heart pounding, mind racing, betrayed by those he trusted most, yet determined to reclaim the life they were so eager to dismantle. He wasn't alone in this. The thought of Sarah, his 10-year-old daughter, ignited a spark of hope. Her laughter, her curiosity, her unwavering belief in him. These were the anchors that kept him grounded in this storm. For her, he would fight. For her, he would find a way to rise from these shadows and reclaim the future they sought to steal. As the day wore on and the room darkened, Jack vowed silently to himself. He would listen, learn, and plan. He would pretend to be asleep, all the while awakening to the truth of his world. In this quiet, sterile room, a battle was beginning. A battle for his life, his family, and the promise of a second chance. The hospital room, once a cocoon of silence and solitude, now buzzed with the undercurrents of deceit. Jack lay still, his senses heightened, the hushed conversations of the past few days swirling in his mind like a storm. He was a man reborn into shadows, each revelation casting deeper doubts on the bonds he once cherished. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting slatted patterns across the walls. Jack listened intently, attuned to every footstep, every whisper. Emily and Tom had become regular visitors, their faces masks of concern that thinly veiled their ulterior motives. Today their voices carried a sharper edge, their discussions urgent and pointed. "We can't keep delaying," Emily insisted, her voice taut with frustration. "The startup's valuation is going to skyrocket any day now. We need to move before it's too late." Tom leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping a rhythmic pattern on the armrest. "I'm working on it. The lawyer says we just need to establish incapacity, and then we can start the process. But we have to be careful. If anyone suspects anything, it could all fall apart." Their words hit Jack like a cold splash of water, galvanizing his resolve. They were planning to seize control, not just of his finances, but of his entire future. He couldn't let that happen, not while there was still time to stop them. He remained motionless as they continued to talk, slipping into rehearsed roles whenever a nurse entered the room. Emily would brush her fingers through his hair, whispering words of encouragement as if nothing was amiss. But Jack saw through the facade, the warmth in her voice a brittle veneer. When they finally left, their footsteps echoing down the corridor, Jack allowed himself a deep breath. His mind whirred with possibilities and strategies, each one more desperate than the last. But he needed allies, someone he could trust in this web of deception. It was then that Dr. Helen Carter entered, her presence a balm in the tense atmosphere. She moved with the practiced grace of someone who had seen it all, her eyes sharp and discerning. As she checked his vitals, Jack felt the familiar pull of her intuition. "Good morning, Jack," she said softly, her voice a gentle breeze cutting through the fog of uncertainty. "I've noticed some changes. Subtle, but there. You're more aware than you let on, aren't you?" Her question hung in the air, a lifeline offered in the darkness. Jack hesitated for a moment, then responded with the barest twitch of his hand, a signal he hoped she would understand. Dr. Carter's eyes met his, a flicker of understanding passing between them. She adjusted the monitors, leaning closer as if to examine the readings more closely. "I'll take that as a yes," she murmured, her lips barely moving. "If you can hear me, know that you're not alone. We'll find a way through this, but you need to trust me." Jack's heart surged with a mix of relief and gratitude. In a world that seemed to have turned against him, Dr. Carter was a beacon of hope. Her discreet support was the first step toward regaining control, a reminder that even in shadows, light could be found. As she left, Jack's resolve hardened. He had an ally now, someone who could help him navigate the treacherous waters of deceit and betrayal. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was his determination to protect what mattered most. With newfound strength, Jack began to chart his course. He would listen, learn, and adapt. He would gather every piece of evidence he could, all the while maintaining the ruse of unconsciousness. In this silent war, knowledge was his greatest weapon, and with Dr. Carter by his side, he felt the first stirrings of hope. As the day gave way to evening, Jack closed his eyes, not in resignation, but in preparation. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but he was ready to face them. For Sarah, for himself, and for the future they tried to steal, he would rise from the shadows and reclaim his life. The rhythmic hum of the hospital gradually became a soothing backdrop as Jack's resolve steeled with every passing hour. He lay still, a silent observer in his own life, piecing together the fragmented conversations and half-truths he had overheard. Betrayal had sharpened his senses, and now he was ready to fight back. The door swung open, and Dr. Helen Carter entered with a clipboard in hand, her presence a comforting constant in the midst of uncertainty. Her expression was one of calm determination, her eyes scanning the monitors before landing on Jack with a knowing gaze. "Good morning, Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she drew the curtain for privacy. Her hand lingered on his wrist, as though checking his pulse, but the gentle squeeze that followed was more than just a medical assessment. "I've been reviewing your progress, and it seems you're making remarkable strides." Her words carried a double meaning, acknowledging not only his physical recovery, but also his awareness of the deceit surrounding him. Jack responded with a subtle movement of his fingers, a silent confirmation of their shared understanding. Dr. Carter's eyes softened, and she leaned in closer, her voice low enough that only Jack could hear. "I know about Emily and Tom," she continued. "I've seen their kind before, wolves in sheep's clothing. But we have time, and we can make a plan." The reassurance in her tone was a lifeline, a promise of support in a world that felt increasingly hostile. Jack focused on her words, drawing strength from the alliance that was forming between them. "Here's what we'll do," she said, outlining a strategy with the precision of a seasoned tactician. "First, we'll work on getting you stronger. Physical therapy will be crucial, not just for your recovery, but to buy us time and keep them off balance. And when the time is right, we'll have the evidence you need." As she spoke, Jack felt the stirrings of hope rekindling in his chest. Dr. Carter was more than just his doctor. She was a partner in his fight, offering guidance and a way forward through the tangled web of betrayal. With her help, Jack began to undergo physical therapy, each session a grueling test of endurance and willpower. The exercises were small victories, moving a finger, flexing a muscle, the gradual return of control over his body. Dr. Carter was there every step of the way, her encouragement a balm against the lingering doubts that occasionally threatened his resolve. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Jack grew stronger. His sessions became a facade, a charade for Emily and Tom to witness and misinterpret. They believed him still incapacitated, while Jack secretly gathered strength and information, preparing for the confrontation that loomed on the horizon. In the quiet hours of the night, when the hospital settled into a peaceful lull, Jack would replay their conversations in his mind, piecing together the puzzle of their intentions. He learned of their desperation to secure his assets, their plans to expedite the legal processes that would render him powerless. But with Dr. Carter's guidance, Jack was always one step ahead. She provided him with a small digital recorder, discreetly tucked beneath his pillow, allowing him to capture incriminating evidence of their conversations. Every whisper, every scheming word was preserved, a growing arsenal in his silent battle. Despite the physical and emotional toll, Jack found solace in his progress. Each small triumph in therapy, each recorded conversation, was a testament to his resilience and determination. He was no longer a passive participant in his own life, but an active force, reclaiming his agency piece by piece. As the chapter drew to a close, Jack lay in the darkened room, the steady beep of the monitors a reassuring cadence. He was readying himself for the challenges ahead, aware that the path was fraught with uncertainty and risk. But he was not alone. In Dr. Carter, he had found an ally, a friend, and together they would navigate the shadows and emerge victorious. The hospital room was now a familiar battleground where Jack fought silently against the shadows encroaching on his life. Every day brought new challenges and revelations, and with each one, the stakes seemed to climb higher. Jack could feel the tension in the air, like the charged stillness before a storm, and he knew that the time to act was drawing near. Emily and Tom's visits had become more frequent, their discussions increasingly urgent. Jack observed them through half-closed eyes, every word they spoke adding fuel to the fire of his determination. He watched as they plotted their next moves, oblivious to his growing awareness. "We can't wait much longer," Emily insisted, her voice tinged with frustration as she paced the room. "The lawyers are getting impatient, and the startup's shares are rising by the day. If we don't act now, we could lose everything." Tom leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his brow furrowed in thought. I know. But we need to be careful. Jack's condition could change, and we need solid proof that he's not coming back." Their words hit Jack like a physical blow, a reminder of their betrayal and the precariousness of his situation, but it also strengthened his resolve. He had to act swiftly, to turn their greed and ambition against them. He had collected enough evidence to expose their deceit, and with Dr. Carter's help, he could use it to his advantage. The afternoon sun filtered through the window, casting a warm glow across the room. Jack lay in silence, the small recorder hidden beneath his pillow, capturing every word spoken by Emily and Tom. It was his secret weapon, a collection of their conspiratorial whispers that would one day unravel their carefully laid plans. Dr. Carter entered quietly, her presence a beacon of hope in the gathering storm. She checked his vitals with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew the stakes all too well. "You're doing well, Jack," she murmured, her voice low and reassuring. "We've gathered enough evidence to make our move, but you need to be ready for what comes next." Jack's response was a subtle nod, the only movement he could manage without drawing suspicion. Her words were a reminder of the battle that lay ahead, a confrontation that would require every ounce of his strength and courage. As she left, Jack's thoughts turned to Sarah. His daughter's laughter and innocence were the anchors that kept him grounded, her image a beacon guiding him through the darkness. He would protect her future at all costs, even if it meant facing the storm head-on. In the quiet solitude of the night, Jack's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The weight of betrayal bore down on him, a heavy burden that threatened to crush his spirit. He wrestled with the memories of happier times, of family dinners and shared dreams that now felt like cruel illusions. Emily's betrayal cut the deepest, a wound that throbbed with each passing moment. He had loved her, trusted her, and the thought of her conspiring against him was a bitter pill to swallow. But amidst the hurt, a spark of determination burned bright. He would not let their deceit destroy him. He would fight back, for himself and for the daughter who depended on him. As dawn broke, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. The evidence he had gathered, coupled with Dr. Carter's unwavering support, gave him the confidence to face what lay ahead. He was no longer a passive victim, but a man ready to reclaim his life. The day wore on, each minute stretching with anticipation. Jack knew the confrontation was imminent, that the storm was about to break. But he was ready, his heart and mind steeled for the challenges to come. The hospital room, once a sanctuary of silence and secrets, was now charged with an electric tension. Jack's plan had reached its critical juncture, and today was the day he would reveal his cards. The delicate balance of deception and strategy would tip, and with it, the truth would come to light. The morning sun bathed the hospital room in a false sense of calm. Jack lay still, his heart pounding in anticipation. Dr. Helen Carter moved about the room with practiced ease, preparing for what she knew would be a pivotal moment. She adjusted the curtains, ensuring that the room remained an oasis of privacy and secrecy. Jack had arranged for Emily and Tom to visit under the pretense of a routine checkup. Dr. Carter had promised to bring them in with the guise of discussing his recovery, an opportunity Jack planned to seize. His pulse quickened as he mentally rehearsed the confrontation that awaited. Emily entered first, her demeanor a mix of false cheer and underlying anxiety. "Good morning, Jack," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're here to check on your progress. I hope you're feeling better." Tom followed closely behind, his expression a guarded mask of concern. "How's it looking, Doc? Any signs of improvement?" Dr. Carter nodded, her gaze flicking to Jack with a barely perceptible signal. "I think it's time we had a little chat," she said, her tone professional but laced with an unspoken urgency. "Jack's condition has shown some significant changes. He might be ready for more interaction than we anticipated." As Dr. Carter spoke, Jack felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He took a deep breath, mentally bracing himself for the next step. With a determined effort, he shifted slightly, his eyes opening slowly, their gaze meeting Emily and Tom's with a clarity that belied his previously feigned coma. Emily's gasp was audible, her hand flying to her mouth as she took in the sight of Jack's awakening form. "Jack, you're awake!" Tom's reaction was more measured, but no less revealing. His eyes darted between Jack and Emily, his mind racing as he tried to process the sudden shift. "This can't be happening," he muttered, his voice strained. Jack's voice was hoarse but resolute as he spoke for the first time in months. "I heard everything," he said, his gaze fixed on Emily. "Every plan, every scheme." The room fell into a stunned silence. Emily's face turned pale, and Tom's jaw tightened. Dr. Carter stepped back, giving them space to react while maintaining a vigilant watch over the unfolding drama. Jack reached under his pillow and retrieved the small recorder, pressing the play button. The room was filled with the recorded voices of Emily and Tom, their words revealing their calculated plans to claim his assets and bypass his legal rights. The betrayal was laid bare, each sentence a damning testament to their treachery. Emily's tears were genuine now, streaming down her face as she sank into a chair, her composure shattered. "Jack, I didn't mean for it to come to this," she stammered, her voice breaking. "I was desperate. I thought—" "Desperate?" Jack's voice cut through her excuses with a cold edge. "You were plotting behind my back, trying to take everything I've worked for, all while I was powerless to stop you." Tom stood by the window, his face flushed with anger and guilt. "We thought you were never coming back," he said, his voice strained. "We were trying to protect Sarah's future. We thought—" Jack's anger flared, but he controlled it with an effort. "Protect Sarah's future? By betraying her father? By stealing from me? How could you think that was in her best interest?" The confrontation was raw and painful, each word a blow in the verbal sparring match. Jack's emotions surged, hurt, anger, betrayal. But beneath it all was a steely determination. He had to make them understand the depth of their wrongs, and he had to ensure that his daughter's future remained intact. As the confrontation reached its peak, Dr. Carter intervened with a calming presence. "We need to address the legal and emotional fallout of this situation," she said, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. "Jack, you have the evidence you need. Now we need to move forward and ensure that your rights are protected." Jack nodded, his gaze fixed on Emily and Tom. "We'll work through this," he said, his voice firm. "But know this, I will not tolerate betrayal. I will fight for my rights and for Sarah's future. And if that means legal action and rebuilding trust from the ground up, then so be it." Emily and Tom, now faced with the consequences of their actions, were left to grapple with their guilt and the reality of Jack's resolve. The room, once a stage for deceit, had become a battleground for truth and justice. As the visitors left, their faces etched with regret and uncertainty, Jack felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The storm had broken, and while the damage was significant, the path to resolution had begun. With Dr. Carter's support and the evidence in hand, Jack was ready to rebuild his life, one step at a time. The hospital room had become a place of quiet determination, rather than subdued despair. The confrontation had left its mark, but the real work lay ahead. Jack's path to recovery and reclamation was fraught with obstacles, but with each step, he felt the weight of his new reality. The morning after the confrontation, the atmosphere in the hospital was charged with a subdued tension. Emily and Tom had left, their faces a mixture of shame and defiance. Dr. Helen Carter moved through the room with a quiet efficiency, her actions meticulous and deliberate as she prepared for the day ahead. Jack lay in his bed, his mind a whirlwind of plans and strategies. The evidence he had collected was a powerful weapon, but it was only the beginning. He needed to secure his position, both legally and emotionally, before he could move forward. His thoughts were interrupted by Dr. Carter's entrance. "How are you feeling today, Jack?" she asked, her voice a soothing balm against the backdrop of his internal chaos. "Like a storm has passed," Jack replied, his voice steady but tired. "But I know there's more to come." Dr. Carter nodded, her expression reflecting both understanding and concern. "There is. The confrontation was a necessary first step, but now we need to focus on the legal aspects. You'll need representation, and we'll have to navigate the fallout of your recovery." Jack's eyes met hers with a steely resolve. "I'm ready. What's the next step?" Later that day, Jack's room became a makeshift office as he met with his attorney, Susan Wright. She was a seasoned lawyer, known for her sharp intellect and unyielding commitment to her clients. She reviewed the evidence Jack had gathered, her eyes narrowing as she processed the gravity of the situation. "This is a gold mine," Susan said, her voice tinged with both admiration and concern. "The recordings you have are damning. They paint a clear picture of their intentions, but we'll need to approach this carefully. The legal process can be slow, and Emily and Tom will likely fight back." Jack leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I need this resolved quickly. I don't want Sarah to suffer because of their actions." "What's the best course of action?" Susan's face grew serious. "We'll file a motion for an emergency hearing to address the immediate concerns. This will give us a legal footing to contest their claims and establish your rights. It's crucial that we act swiftly and decisively." As Susan outlined the legal strategy, Jack absorbed every detail. He knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but he was determined to see it through. With the legal groundwork in place, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. In the days following the confrontation, Jack focused on rebuilding the connections that had been strained by betrayal. His interactions with Emily were strained but necessary. He had to address the emotional fallout and find a way to co-parent effectively for Sarah's sake. One evening, as Emily visited him for what was becoming a more formal and guarded exchange, Jack looked at her with a mix of sadness and resolve. "Emily, I want to find a way to work through this, for Sarah's sake, but I need honesty from you. No more deceit." Emily's eyes were downcast, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Jack. I was wrong, and I see that now. I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I hope we can find a way to move forward for Sarah." Jack nodded, his expression softening slightly. "We'll take it one step at a time. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight, but we'll work on it." As they spoke, Jack realized that the path to healing and reconciliation was a journey of its own. It would take time, patience, and effort, but it was a necessary part of reclaiming his life and securing his daughter's future. With the legal battle underway and his personal relationships on the mend, Jack began to focus on his recovery. Physical therapy sessions became a symbol of his resilience, each movement a testament to his determination to regain full control of his life. Dr. Carter remained a steadfast ally, her support instrumental in Jack's progress. She continued to guide him through the recovery process, her expertise a crucial element in his journey. "You're making excellent progress, Jack," she said during one session. "Keep this up, and you'll be back on your feet in no time." As Jack worked through his rehabilitation, he also took steps to ensure Sarah's future was secure. He began making plans for her education and well-being, determined to provide her with a stable and loving environment despite the turbulence of the past months. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Jack felt a sense of cautious optimism. The storm had passed, but the journey ahead was still fraught with challenges. With his legal battle gaining momentum and his personal relationships slowly healing, Jack prepared for the next phase of his fight, a phase that would determine not only his future, but the future of the family he cherished. The hospital room had transformed from a stage of intrigue and betrayal into a place of healing and new beginnings. Jack had endured the storm and emerged on the other side, his path clear but fraught with the weight of his recent trials. As he prepared for the final phase of his journey, he knew that redemption and resolution were within reach, but not without their own trials. The day of the emergency hearing dawned with a chill in the air, a sharp contrast to the warmth Jack had hoped for in his personal life. The courthouse loomed ahead, its granite facade a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation. Jack walked with a determined stride, flanked by Susan Wright and Dr. Helen Carter. Each step he took was a step closer to reclaiming his future and ensuring his daughter's security. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension. Jack took his place at the table, his heart racing with anticipation. Emily and Tom sat across the room, their expressions a mixture of anxiety and defiance. They were flanked by their own attorney, a slick and unyielding figure who exuded confidence. Judge Thompson, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for fairness, took her seat. Her gaze swept over the room, taking in the gravity of the situation. We're here today to address the issues surrounding the incapacitation claim and the subsequent legal matters, she announced, her voice authoritative. Let's proceed. Susan Wright began her presentation, methodically laying out the evidence of Emily and Tom's deceit. The recordings Jack had collected were played for the court, each snippet revealing the extent of their scheming. The courtroom fell silent as the damning evidence was presented, the weight of betrayal evident in every word. Emily and Tom's attorney attempted to counter, but the evidence was overwhelming. Their arguments seemed increasingly hollow in the face of Jack's irrefutable proof. Jack watched as the tide turned, his resolve hardening with every word spoken in his favor. The proceedings stretched into the afternoon, and as the courtroom reconvened, Jack felt a mix of hope and trepidation. Judge Thompson took her seat, her expression thoughtful as she prepared to deliver her verdict. After reviewing the evidence and considering the arguments presented, Judge Thompson began, her tone measured and clear. It is evident that the claims of incapacity were not only unfounded, but driven by ulterior motives. The court recognizes the betrayal and deceit involved in this case. Jack held his breath as the judge continued. Emily and Tom's actions were not in the best interest of the incapacitated party or his daughter. Therefore, the court rules in favor of Jack, reinstating his rights and addressing the claims made by the defendants. A wave of relief washed over Jack, and he exchanged a glance with Susan and Dr. Carter. The battle had been arduous, but the victory was sweet. Emily and Tom's faces were a mix of defeat and resignation, their plans unraveled by the evidence and Jack's unwavering determination. With the legal battle resolved, Jack began to focus on the next chapter of his life. The hospital room, once a symbol of his struggles, now represented a new beginning. As he prepared for his discharge, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Dr. Carter visited him one last time before his release. "You've come a long way, Jack," she said, her voice warm with admiration. "Your strength and perseverance have been remarkable. Remember, the road to full recovery is ongoing, but you've proven that you can face whatever comes your way." Jack nodded, his gratitude evident. "Thank you, Dr. Carter. Your support has been invaluable. I couldn't have done this without you." As he prepared to leave the hospital, Jack was filled with a sense of cautious optimism. He had fought for his rights and his daughter's future, and now it was time to rebuild. His home awaited, a place that needed to be filled with love and stability. The first day back home was a whirlwind of emotions. Jack was eager to see Sarah, to hold her in his arms and reassure her that everything would be okay. As he walked through the door, he was greeted by the sight of his daughter, her face lighting up with pure joy. "Daddy!" Sarah exclaimed, rushing into his embrace. Her small arms wrapped around him, and Jack felt a profound sense of peace. The trials of the past months melted away in the warmth of her hug. Jack knelt down, looking into Sarah's eyes. "I'm home, sweetheart, and we're going to make things better, okay?" Sarah nodded, her eyes sparkling with trust and love. "Okay, Daddy." As Jack settled into his new routine, he found solace in the simple joys of fatherhood. Each day was an opportunity to rebuild and reconnect, to create a stable and loving environment for Sarah. The scars of betrayal remained, but they no longer defined him. Instead, he focused on the future, on the life he would build with his daughter. With Dr. Carter's support and Susan Wright's legal expertise, Jack had reclaimed his life and ensured that his daughter's future was secure. The journey had been fraught with challenges, but Jack emerged stronger, his heart and mind focused on what truly mattered. As the sun set on his first day back home, Jack looked out the window, feeling a sense of contentment. The storm had passed and a new chapter awaited, a chapter of healing, hope, and the promise of a brighter future.